So, Berto, you and I just watched the Allen versus Farrow documentary on HBO. Mm-hmm. First initial reaction in one sentence, Berto, what is it?
Oh my effing God.
Yeah, for me, it was yikes, big time. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about the documentary. We're also going to talk about Woody Allen. We're going to talk about Dylan Farrow. We're going to talk about the evidence, and I'm going to speculate about what may or may not be wrong with Woody Allen. We're going to talk about abuse, and so if you're triggered by such things, I would listen with caution or not listen. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castaneda. I'm a pencil eraser inspector.
Yeah, so big time yikes. I remember buying his story in the 90s. Did you? Do you remember when this came out?
Let's start by this. Even though I might have heard more about it at some point, I sort of only knew that he married her daughter, like the Sunyi thing or whatever. Like that was sort of all I knew, but I must have heard more, and either I thought, who knows, whatever, or I don't know, or I just forgot or something. Because when I was watching the documentary, I'm like, wait, what? I honestly thought we were dealing with like how unethical or how whatever, any number of adjectives of like that he married her nearly underage daughter, you know.
Yeah, I remember hearing the details, and in the 90s, it was, you'd get information from the news or MTV or something, maybe the newspaper, and it's no surprise, given how good Woody Allen was with media and how sort of avoidant Mia and Dylan, obviously Dylan as a child, was with the media, and how beloved Woody Allen was back then, and how far it was before Me Too, that the general gestalt that everyone had was Woody Allen was being framed by a wrathful ex-girlfriend, Mia Farrow, who was manipulating her child Dylan, and how sad that was, and how impossible it was to imagine that Woody Allen would do those things.
Oh, and by the way, he's an excellent actor.
Right, and an excellent writer, and an excellent manipulator of emotion.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
So when he's sitting there in those press conferences, it's like, you believe him. You're like, yeah, that's tough that you're going through this.
So what percentage do you believe that he sexually abused Dylan Farrow?
Oh, by the end of the thing, I'm like, yeah, zero doubt, like 100%. My mental math was, okay, so on the left hand, I have a guy who absolutely did seduce and marry, or whatever, married one of her adoptive daughters at her very young age, just as she was of age, and with a lot of rumors circling it. That part is undisputed. Like, he himself claimed that was the reason for the scorn or whatever, right? So that part's not. So already we're entering in like, well, your morals or your boundaries are certainly questionable. Okay, there's that.
Yeah, judgment.
Second, tons of movies exploring this exact question of an older man and a very young woman, right? Okay, now this is all circumstantial, right? But that's on the left hand. On the right hand, we have these very credible accounts from both the victim, as an adult, as a child, from investigative reporters, from independent researchers and counselors and things, from the mother consistently, year after year, from siblings. And what has the mother been up to? What is all her scandals? She does like crazy amounts of charity work around the world. And so, yeah, once again, like, is some of this like not admissible in a court of law? Yeah, sure. For me, come on, get the F out.
Yeah, for me, I was fairly on board, but I still am holding out for this extremely unlikely scenario that something is a little different than the story that was laid out in the documentary, which we'll get into later. But there's obviously a problem with denying the account from Dylan because, as you said, Dylan has been consistent with the story from the beginning and said that it happened. And so why would anyone, including me, question that. Dylan said, of course, it's basically comes down between Woody Allen's story and Dylan Farrow's story. And almost never, but it does happen, but almost never does an adult victim claiming that they were victimized lie about that. It's if 99% of the time, no one says anything because they know that they're going to be ostracized, particularly if it's someone like Woody Allen. And so she has every reason not to say something and not a lot of reasons to say something, especially as an adult. It'd be one thing if she claimed that as a 7-year-old and then just wanted to put it behind her, which many victims will do. It's another thing for her as an adult to be like, no, I remember it happened. And that it just would be extremely unlikely that she would lie. But might she lie? Might she have fabricated memory? It's possible as a therapist who has been involved in these kinds of cases and knows the science. I have to leave that as a possibility. It'd be nice if we had 100% certainty with these things, but we just don't, and that's part of the problem. But do I believe Dylan? Yeah, of course. I don't. Why would she lie about it? Now she might be, but politically and also advocacy-wise, I support Dylan and what her statement is. And anyway, so watching the documentary for me, yeah, big time yikes. I feel so bad for Dylan Farrow and Mia Farrow for that matter, the whole family. And the documentary definitely lays out a story that is very compelling. If you haven't seen it, it's on HBO. It's pretty short. It's just 4 hours. And for a documentary these days, that's pretty short, right? Yeah. I think Tiger King was like 10 hours or something. And so, it moves pretty quick. It's pretty, dare I say, entertaining because, it has to do with Woody Allen and all the people that they ran around with. And there's a lot of footage because Mia Farrow took a lot of videotape. She had a VHS home video camera, and there's just a lot of home footage. Woody Allen without his glasses hanging around at the pool
right.
And just these behind the scenes footage things. And we just have to add yet another person, another hero of mine from my childhood to not only just someone that's problematic, but like a genuine monster. O.J. Simpson, Bill Cosby. I know people are going to hate me for saying this, but Michael Jackson, maybe. Okay, let's just say at the very least, there's a chance that he was a monster. I know a lot of people don't think he did it, but Roman Polanski was not so much a hero of mine, but definitely respected him. But Bill Cosby, O.J. Simpson, Woody Allen, I mean, these were... If you had like the Mount Rushmore of 80s heroes of mine or entertainment heroes of our society, these people would be up there for sure. I mean, Bill Cosby from 1983 until 1990 was arguably the most famous, aside from Michael Jackson and Madonna, maybe. And then you have Madonna. There's things about her. O.J. Simpson, just a hugely loved person from like 1975 until 1985. And Woody Allen for so many years, just beloved. And you start to wonder, was it designed to promote that sort of person into the limelight? Because we all understand that these sorts of individuals are rare. I mean, the things that Bill Cosby is accused of is extremely rare, right? And the behavior of Woody Allen is extremely rare. I mean, even people who abuse kids, they don't usually marry them.
Yeah. So it's weird. I wonder if the Rarity, if there's sort of a push-pull with the Rarity, as in, yes, in general it's rare, but would more individuals be like that were they given the opportunity? Because not everyone has the power that a Bill Cosby has.
No. Bill, if you or I
I don't mean someone that wouldn't. I'm just wondering, do we not get to see the full possibility of the percentages? Because most people don't have the kind of power that it takes to silence all these things, so they might be afraid to act on those instincts or on those impulses.
I know, but it's arguable that 50% of the biggest stars, the top 10 stars of the 80s, 50% of them are abusers of a high degree. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, actually, you could even add him, even though he was more behind the scenes, beginning in the 80s, moving into the 90s. It's just a high prevalence. And then, so you wonder, well, if we understand this to be a rare condition, what could be a factor? Well, maybe if you are a psychopath or a sadist, or there's something kind of off about you, maybe you're attracted to these powerful positions, you're sort of obsessed. But I think it kind of, so actually, let's sort of drill down on this. So for Bill Cosby, you could imagine, given his profile, that he would be highly driven to be charismatic and very charming as a way of trying to get his way, get his victimization, because he had a very particular shtick, MO when it came to abusing people. He wanted them to be, he wanted to pull them in, because we all understand that Bill Cosby could have had sex with a lot of people who would be willing to have sex with him.
Absolutely.
Right? Maybe not everyone he wanted to have sex with, but a lot of people, particularly when he was younger. I mean,
he would not be sex starved.
Right. So it wasn't that he wanted sex. He wanted to drug them and have them be unconscious and want them to wake up knowing, because he didn't try to hide the fact that he knocked them out. He didn't say like, oh, you must have just kind of, it was so obvious as to what happened that right. He liked it. I think he also liked I'm just speculating, but, and of course these are all allegations from dozens of women for 30 years, that he, so I think for him, it could be that he was actually attracted to the limelight because it gave him that ability to do that sort of thing. Maybe he also liked the limelight, but it was an added benefit. For Michael Jackson, if he is guilty, if he did, any number of those things, which of course none of us know because we weren't there, but if he did, then I think for him, his profile was one of immaturity and one of desperation and one of feeling comfortable with young people due to his attachment and developmental issues. If Michael Jackson were just like your cousin and wasn't famous, I'm pretty sure everyone would say, something's up with that guy, right? There's just because he was this giant star, you just say, well, giant stars they're kind of eccentric. But he was massively abused and was noticeably immature and noticeably interested in childish things. And when we were in the 80s, we just thought it was, well, Michael Jackson is this wonderful, philanthropist of child welfare or something. But looking back, I think he actually just didn't like being an adult. I think he just really liked remaining a child, and for reasons related to his abuse, probably, right? And I think that if he did do those things, I think that it was because he didn't feel comfortable with adults. And he had a sex drive, and so he targeted, in a psychopathic manner, children. Was Michael Jackson, when you look at the Bill Cosby allegations, it's a completely different profile and maybe a completely different disorder, maybe a completely different motivation. And then you look at someone like Harvey Weinstein, again, totally different, more like Bill Cosby, someone who actually gets off on, again, Harvey Weinstein could have had sex with a lot of people. He's a very powerful person, but he liked forcing people to have sex with him. He wanted, to some degree, the coercion. That was a part of it. And then you look at someone like Roland Polanski, who seemed to genuinely just be interested in young people for sort of common pedophilic reasons. And then you look at someone like Woody Allen. So let's get into it about why do you think, so when we talk about these different types, well, actually, let me talk about the different types. I'm going to skip down in my notes.
Oh, and sorry, so, and I'll mention, this is probably related to different types, because Roman Polanski doesn't deny it and actually claims, well, yeah, you might find it weird, but that person was into it. And it's a very different situation from if you are to believe the Woody Allen, it's like, oh, not only are they lying, they're a chronic liar, turning the whole family and ruining those children by lying. And like, it's crazy. Like, because, you know, you could have imagined someone breaking down and saying, oh God, I did it. I have a problem. Can we please, I'll go to rehab or whatever, right? Instead, nope. No, I'm going to take your kids away from you, and you are, you know, you are the problem, and it's all lies. And
yeah. So and this is my typology. There's been many proposed typologies of offenders of children, sexual offenders of children, but this is my typology based on my minor expertise, given how many times listeners ask us to cover these topics, because this isn't a clinical expertise of mine. I don't work with these folks. I mean, I have, but it's not a specialty by any means. So these are my this is my typology. Because the typologies that I've seen in the research, I'm like, I don't know if that really fits my understanding. But so number one are pedophiles, people who are attracted to minors. These individuals can be psychopathic, meaning that they can lack empathy, or they could have empathy. There are plenty of pedophiles, people who are seemingly born, or when their sexuality develops, they're just, oh my God, I'm attracted to kids. And plenty of them, perhaps most of them, actually have empathy and compassion and refrain from actually abusing children. And they might fantasize in their mind, or they might just try to shut down the whole sexuality altogether. But these are pedophiles. Now, you could be a pedophile and also be psychopathic or justify your actions. Maybe Roman Polanski is kind of in that group. And pedophiles can be attracted to any age. They tend to, be attracted to a particular age. So, every age group has its pedophile that's attracted to it. And second type is sadistic personality disorder, and also including as a subset is sexually sadists. So these people are just generally sadistic, and meaning that they get off on harming other people, and children are just easy targets, and sexual harm is just one of the various ways that sadists will harm people. So people who are sadistic in general will generally harm lots of people of every age in various ways. Just whoever is an easy target, they'll just harm them because they get off on that. Whether it's poisoning someone or pushing someone downstairs or insulting someone online, they love it. It's a rare condition, extremely rare, but they exist, and we've studied them. And then a subset of this is people who actually are sexually sadistic, and this is someone like Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy had a number of other labels we could have applied to him, but he clearly got off sexually by raping and killing. And it wasn't just that, well, anyway, so that's sadism. That's the second type. And there's a lot of people in that group. And the difference between sadists and pedophiles is, again, sadists, children are just easy targets for their harm. And if they could harm anyone, it wouldn't matter if it was children or not. The third type is what I'm calling the mimicking type. And this is actually perhaps the person you were abused by, Berto. Mm-hmm. She was, in all likelihood, abused when she was younger. She was 12, right?
Yeah.
When she abused you?
Right.
And who knows, but she could have been a pedophile. She could have been a sadist. But it seems possible that she was abused and she just mimicked the abuse as a 12-year-old towards you. These people might grow up to have regular sexual lives and not reoffend. They might not be sadistic. And so there's a fair amount of people. Usually these people are children. The mimickers are usually children. So if someone abused their younger sibling and then went on to not abuse and not have an impulse to abuse anyone later in life, then they're probably in this camp, this mimicry or sort of sexually abused reactivity type. Now, of course, those people can mimic throughout their life. At the age of 30, they can still, quote unquote, mimic what they were shown. The fourth type is sexually compulsive type. These people, it's sort of like OCD. They essentially just have an overwhelming urge to have sex or to touch other people in certain ways, maybe even to violate them. And I actually worked with someone like this in my past, and it was a thing to watch. It was scary. The amount of time that he spent thinking about sexually violating other people, like on a second by second basis. And
wow.
As soon as he was given an opportunity, and I saw it happen, as soon as he was given a chance, as soon as someone wasn't eyes on him, within a second, he was on his way to harming someone physically.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was shocking. It was an obsession of his. It wasn't something I don't think he had any control over, because it was completely ruining his life. It was so out of control. It was so noticeable that everyone knew about it and prevented him from, he was everything in his life was falling apart because of this. And you just wonder, like, that doesn't seem like you have any control over it, right? That's a pretty rare condition. And then the final one is what I'm calling the regressed type. And this is what, if Michael Jackson did it again, can you tell that the internet is a little divided about the Michael Jackson issue?
No, I wouldn't know.
If Woody Allen did it, then he would also, I think, be in this camp. They are people who basically only feel secure with younger people for various abuse reasons or attachment reasons. These people are often introverted and have a hard time relating or feeling comfortable with people their own age. Yeah. And so, and we see this all the time in normal terms. Like, you'll have when I worked with families, I would work with a lot of teens and kids, and 1 in 10 of the kids I worked with, a frequent report from the family and the school was that the kid liked hanging out with younger kids. You had a 10-year-old that didn't get along with other 10-year-olds. They got along with 7-year-olds really well. And they would often feel kind of like a big brother to the 7-year-olds in the neighborhood. And we would observe, and, they played appropriately, didn't harm anyone. But you could clearly see that the 10-year-old just felt kind of like a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Or the 13-year-old felt like a 10-year-old. A 13-year-old girl, when she hangs out with other 13-year-olds, they're talking about whatever 13-year-old teenagers think about, either, I don't know.
What do 13-year-olds?
Billie Eilish or, yeah. Well, I was going to say Hannah Montana, but that's like 20 years too late. But, stuff like that, right? It's like tween stuff.
Right.
And some 13-year-old girls are just like, what? Like, if you have a 10-year-old girl hanging out with 13-year-old girls, the 10-year-old girl won't be able to relate probably. Well, if you feel like a 10-year-old at the age of 13, then you're going to play with them. And we could imagine that being exaggerated, where a 56-year-old only feels comfortable hanging out with a 7-year-old or a 15-year-old. We could understand that, as long as it's not inappropriate or sexual or harmful. We're like, okay, that's fine. In some respects, you just relate better to younger people. Yeah. That's okay. But if you also have attachment needs and sexual needs, you're going to feel only comfortable with that age group, and then you're going to make excuses because you need to get your needs met, and you're going to harm other people. And from the documentary, it just kind of looked like Woody Allen was that way. What do you think, Bruno?
So I got the sense, look, ever since I've known about Woody Allen, since I was a kid, and I now wonder if it is because, how sometimes when you've been abused, you both might sense certain things about people, or you might be attracted to people you might be able to abuse. You know that? I don't know if that's a scientific fact, but that's sort of like informal wisdom. Because I will say that from my own experience, when I was younger, I definitely could see certain predatory patterns to me, like finding out, like you kind of look for people that you could predate on. And I luckily never, fully ended up going down that path and certainly not with kids or anything, but I could sense that something about my physiology or the way I perceive things must have been affected by those experiences. Anyways, and similarly, and this might just be random, but I often do get weird feelings about some people. Like, oh, I wonder if this person's is like safe to be around if you're younger. But anyways, with Woody Allen, from the moment I was a kid, I was always like, that guy is creepy. Now,
really?
Yes. Now, it could just be because, you know, when you're a kid and you see this older dude acting all weird and funny, or all weird, funny to some, maybe that's just odd. But for whatever reason, I never had a good feeling. Now, as I grew older and I watched some of his movies, I appreciated them. I'm like, wow, these are really entertaining. And then I kind of grew into his mannerisms. I'm like, okay. Because one of the things that really used to annoy me when I was young, probably in my teens, I was like, why does this Woody Allen character seems to have a lot of female attention? Why? He seems like this weakling, like this soft-spoken weirdo. Like, what? And I was always so annoyed about this. Like, grr, why is he getting attention?
Well, he wrote it into the script.
No, I understand. But even in the news, like, you would see, like, Mia Farrow is beautiful, right? Like, that's his ex-wife? Like, what? So, okay, so I would think about that. All right, fast forward, I end up loving his movies and thinking, okay, I see. I'll see through his mannerisms, think the guy's a genius, blah, blah. Okay, great. And then I heard this thing about the daughter, and at the time I remember thinking, there was something funny about him after all. But that's about it. Now I'm watching this documentary, I'm like, oh yeah, now it's clear as day. Like, the guy absolutely has these mannerisms and things. It's like, he's still like a little kid in some ways. And sadly, and if this is all true, ends up manifesting as like he can connect emotionally better if they're younger. And I'm like, oh, wow, that is incredible.
You've come full circle.
Yeah.
You've come back to realizing he's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you're picking up on something. When people are abused, they often have a lightning rod or a good radar for that. They're both a lightning rod and they have a good radar, meaning that they detect it, at least unconsciously, very easily or more easily. And they're also a attractor because, as you were talking about earlier, because of your abuse, it gave you some impulses to abuse other people. And you would detect that, oh, that person is more easily victimized. You just had a sense. And
it was never conscious. Like, I never once in my life had a conversation in my head like, ooh, I could abuse that person. It's never like that. It was always simply implicit. Like, I'm just going to push my boundaries here. But in looking in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that's odd.
Right.
How coincidental that then I go and find out this person has been abused.
Right.
And that I've re-traumatized them by me pushing boundaries.
Right. Yeah, and you didn't push boundaries with a different person, and you think, that person has a way about them that isn't the result of being traumatized, and your radar was able to detect, though, subconsciously, don't go there with that person, but do go there with that person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So my hypothesis, and this is as I was watching the documentary, I'm like, okay, this is interesting because his presentation, at least the way the documentary lays it out, and I've known a lot about Woody Allen up until this point as well, so it's not like I'm just following the documentary, and looking into it more, I developed the following hypothesis. This is a total guess because I haven't assessed him. I can't diagnose from afar. All I have in terms of data is from limited resources, biased resources. So, but, for the sake of education, I've seen this happen before, and I wonder if this would be the hypothesis I would pursue if I was tasked by Woody Allen himself to figure out what was wrong with him, if there was something wrong with him. So the beginning of this, obviously, is something was wrong with his early childhood. Was it abuse? Was it neglect? Was it subtle? I suspect, given his own story about his own childhood, that it was subtle neglect emotionally and discounting of who he was, so that he felt when he was young that he couldn't really depend on other people. That would be my guess. And then
I'm not familiar with the story in general.
He doesn't, without going into the details, I'll just say that I don't know. I can't really speculate about the particulars. I'm more sort of working my way back from what I see as an adult, but,
okay.
And there's some things that he'll say that sort of fit that a little bit, where he'll depict his parents as being not super warm and a little frazzled, you know? So anyway, but who knows? But I would suspect that anyone who, if the allegations are true, did what he did, then there would have to be something going on in his early childhood. Okay. So it results in him entering into adulthood, avoiding relationships, mostly because he realizes that he can't trust people. He doesn't feel good when he's around other people. You know, he has an urge to attach to other people, but he finds that it's hard for him, and he has a lot of quote unquote friends, but he just has a really hard time trusting. When he met Mia, as is depicted in both Woody Allen's account and Mia's account, they hit it off, and he said, "I'm not ever going to be a husband. I'm going to live separate from you. We'll see each other frequently. I'm not going to be involved with your children. You don't depend on me." You know.
And by the way, that aspect, I found it so fascinating. I was considering that his account is, I love Dylan so much. I spend so much time with her. And then Dylan's account of the aspect she remembers about that, where he was like right there. In fact, maybe too much there. But there was that part of it where it was like, I want nothing to do with children. I never want to raise children.
Right.
I don't want to see a child. Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it is particular. And it wasn't like he had a whole slew of other women that he was entertaining. I think it was just Mia. And he knew from the very beginning. It wasn't like he started dating Mia Farrow, and as he got into it, he's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm made up to be a stepdad, or yeah, I don't know if I can really marry you and be he knew from the beginning. So before Mia, he had already learned, I can't function in relationships. Now, we have to assume that Woody Allen had all the normal attachment needs and all the normal desires of family and of closeness, but there was something about relationships from his early childhood that he just could not trust other people. And so this was his way of managing. It's like, I want to have a relationship. I want to have a closeness, but it's too threatening, so I have to keep my distance. And Mia Farrow, by the way, acts like a child. Now, she's not childish. She's very maternal, but she has a very youthful vibe, right? Mm-hmm. Her acting, the character she plays, that was one of the things I realized about this documentary was, the character that Mia plays often is the way she is in real life. She's quite meek. She's quite soft-spoken and naive seeming. And
we found out that she had this terrible bout with polio, and that was traumatizing.
Yeah.
There's also something so on the one hand, of course, admirable that someone would adopt so many children.
Yeah.
But the flip side is that there is something to that, right? Like, who is the person that wants to adopt so many children? Why?
Yeah. Well, I could only speculate, but she was a very maternal, so she's both childish as a vibe and demeanor, and very non-threatening. Like, in terms of the way Mia seems to come across, there's just like zero threat from her, at least when you first meet her, probably, right?
Well, even in those recorded calls, when she's 100% aware, if you believe everything, of what Woody is and what he's doing, and she still sounds conciliatory.
Yeah, very nice. And at the same time, not only childish, but also very maternal. She is the all-mother. She wants to save all the children. She wants to save the world. So she is a very attractive, a very attractive person to someone like Woody Allen, if my speculation is correct, that cannot trust people. if you can't trust Mia Farrow, you can't trust anybody. But
Right.
he can't trust people very well, so he kept Mia at a distance. And Mia eventually opened him up, though, and the family environment opened him up. And the way the family was, it gave him this like safe haven from all of a lifetime of avoidance and pain, I'm guessing. And he starts to realize, maybe I can trust other people. And then Dylan enters his life, and at first he's just like at arm's length, but then he starts to realize, actually, if I allow myself to open up to Mia, and now I'm going to open up to this child, wow, this actually feels really good. I didn't know that I liked being a father, because, from the beginning, he's just like, don't depend on me. I can't be a father. I'm not going to be a father.
Yeah.
But then and then from another interpretation, he knew he was a pedophile and he was trying to avoid. But I'm in my hypothesis, I think what happened was he bonded with Dylan and felt a feeling he probably had never felt before, which was, when you're around a child and it's your child and the child loves you back the way children do, like you're everything, right? When it's your child wants your attention, your child prefers everything you say, your child, when they fall down, they cry out for you. You have this effect on your child, which is good. And that's the way it should be. And it makes all the sense in the world that would be. And so I'm guessing that for Woody Allen, again, my sort of running hypothesis is that he had that feeling, and Dylan gave that closeness to Woody. And for the first time in his life, he felt genuinely safe and close to someone, because it's hard to feel threatened by a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old child that loves you. They're honest, they're caring. They want to please you all the time. If you'll sit down and play Legos or draw pictures with them, they'll just spend all the time. They won't text other people. They don't want to leave. If you give them what they want, attention and non-complicated love, then they just bask in it and it feels good, and they give it back to you. And physical too. It's hard not to put hands on with kids. It's they want to sit in your lap, or they want to bump up against you, or they literally want to hug. And
or like when I was in one of my first jobs in this country, I worked at a daycare center for a summer.
Really?
And I had 2 classrooms.
I didn't know that.
I had the 5-year-olds and I had the 1-year-olds. Now the 1-year-olds, it's funny, when you're a teenager, you don't really know. Especially, I didn't grow up in a household with a whole bunch of kids. So, I was an only child in my household, so I didn't really know what a 1-year-old is like or whatever. So in my mind, the 1-year-olds should be able to do a whole bunch of stuff. But it was actually surprising how much personality the different little 1-year-olds had.
Yeah.
But the 5-year-olds, I would get in trouble because I would love, they wanted to be thrown around, and so I'd swing them by their arms, throw them up in the air. And this was pre-tons of lawsuits, but it was just starting, so that I remember them you can't do that. Their arms can fall out of their sockets. And I'm like, what are you talking about? My uncles used to do this all the time.
Yeah.
It's I know, but you got lucky.
Yeah, I've talked about this before. I had a daycare in my house growing up. My mom had a daycare, and they were all mostly between the age of 2 and 5. And yeah, just the cutest things, and all they wanted to do is, hang out. And when I treated kids as well, you get down to the ground, play Legos, they want to sit right up next to you, particularly if they have attachment injuries. And I'm guessing that for Woody Allen, this was extremely intoxicating in some functional ways, that it was not only perhaps in the beginning good for Dylan to be close to another parent, but also for Woody, with a lot of parents, corrective, because it just feels good to hang out with a kid that doesn't harm you, doesn't want to reject you, doesn't want to, isn't thinking thoughts, doesn't sort of distracted by work or something. They're there for you, and you're there for them, and it feels good. And I'm guessing in the beginning it was innocent and a good thing. And then but because Woody Allen and all of his attachment injuries, again, this is complete speculation. I just have almost zero data. The documentary helped me to form this, so there's sort of visual data or narrative data from both Woody Allen and Mia Farrow and Dylan that contributes to this. But eventually he's like, I am now for the first time opening up a vulnerability in my heart that I learned to shut off a long time ago. And Mia Farrow, my girlfriend, gives me a little bit of this attachment need, but Dylan really gives me this attachment need. Now, you'll hear me often talk about how clients will be sexually attracted to their therapist. And one of the conceptualizations is that as a adult and with a lot of attachment injuries, a lot of relationship trauma, and you've been rejected and harmed, and you finally find someone, your therapist, who is actually caring and a safe person, not only will your attachment needs come pouring out, like, please love me, please listen to me, please give me safety, but also your sexual needs will come pouring out, because your whole body is saying, I want to be with this person whole. I don't want to just kind of attach to this therapist. I want to be completely attached. And a part of that system of complete attachment involves your sexual urges. And
right.
And it's also the first person that you feel safe with. And so when your sexuality wants to find someone that you feel safe with to express that with, then it'll come out as well. So it's possible that for Woody Allen, and I'm not making excuses for him, I just want to be clear, that it's possible that for him, in that intoxicating attachment satisfaction for the first time in his life, it led down a road where, and they kind of laid this out in the documentary, where it was a lot of one-on-one time, and then it was a lot of cuddling time, and then it was a lot of maybe naked cuddling time, and then it was a lot of sexual time. And you could make the argument that in the beginning he knew he was headed in that direction. He was just grooming the whole time. It's possible that happens. But another hypothesis is that he was just going one step at a time. He just wanted to meld with this other human being because it felt good to him. It felt like safe and intoxicating. And it wasn't purely sexual. It was more attachment based, and the sex was an asterisk on that desperation. Now, again, it's completely psychopathic to do such a thing to a child. It's wrong. It's victimization. Anyone would know that. But when you're blinded by the possibility of getting some of your attachment needs met and you can feel safe, then you'll make justifications for that sort of thing.
And then we also know it was a pattern for him because of Sunyi.
Right. So then he realizes at some point, I've gone too far with Dylan. And also, I think Dylan started pulling away from him because she didn't like being all consumed. She talked about how when he was arriving, she would dread it because the sexual abuse, obviously, but also just the amount of coercion emotionally that he would perpetrate on her and pull her away. It wasn't like he just said, hey, let's play. Do you want to play? It was, you are coming with me and we are going to hang out for the next 18 hours straight staring into each other's eyes. And she didn't like it. Right.
Oh boy.
And so, he realized, I can't depend on Dylan anymore. Well, but I've now realized that I can find satisfaction attachment wise. Well, there's this other kid that seems kind of reclusive and seems lonely and naive, because in the documentary they talk about how Sunyi had never had a relationship and she was adopted later, like at the age of 10 or something, or and that's actually a specialty of mine. I've worked with particularly Korean kids who were adopted later in life. And
oh, really?
Yeah. At first, I'm Asian, so I got referred, a lot of the Asian families or Asian adoptees. And there's a lot of Korean adoptees in Seattle in white families. And they often were adopted 6 months or later, and those kids who were adopted later have a much greater chance of having a massive attachment injury that can never be healed. Essentially, their neurons developed during a critical time in an environment that actually solidified their brain for the most part in a way that makes it so that they don't really ever attach to people. And the description that they had with Sunyi was actually really consistent with what I would see, where Mia would talk about how she would really try to open, because she adopted lots of kids, but a lot of them were at birth or very young. And with Sunyi, she was older, and she would try to connect with Sunyi, and it just wouldn't work. You would hear Mia say that, and it's the very common story that you'll hear, particularly from the main parent. It's often the mother. They'll just lament how, because to adopt a child, you love human beings. You're not ambivalent about humans. You love humans.
Especially that many. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you must really love being a parent to choose that several times, and the complications that come with it. And to have a child that you're giving and giving and giving and giving, and like years later, the child still seems indifferent to you. I wonder if Sunyi has that. I wouldn't be surprised. And so Woody Allen starts kind of randomly looking around like, well, who can I be close to? And then Sunyi comes along as this very easy target because she doesn't have support. She's not really connected to other people. She is naive. She is safe, maybe in the sense that she's not particularly demanding because she doesn't really care. She's just kind of good on her own, kind of a thing. And also a lot of kids who are teenagers with these backgrounds will have to be quite rebellious and very much wanting to do self-destructive things. And so he bonds with her and then realizes, but she's older. So if I just wait a little bit of time, I can actually meld with this person, this developmentally younger person that doesn't have a lot of personality outside of me,
Right.
The way if I met a fellow 56-year-old person, they have their own friends, they have their own issues, they have power, they can argue back at me. Dylan couldn't do that, and Sunyi also can't do it. Maybe she can do it a little bit more than Dylan can, but so this kind of is the best of both worlds, because in his mind he's like, well, she's almost an adult, or she is 18 or somewhere around that age, and she has sort of the development of a younger person, which is someone that I feel comfortable with, and so this is my person. It started with Mia opening him up, and then Dylan opening him up further and really intoxicating him, and then Sunyi comes along and says, the world is saying to him, look, this is a legal, although extremely taboo and problematic, it's something that he doesn't legally have to hide at that point.
At least by the time that they made it public.
Right.
Yeah. The other aspect of this is he, as was mentioned in the documentary, and I hadn't really thought about, but clearly it's the case, constant theme in a lot of his productions about these relationships between these older men and these younger women. And that seems to be something that he wanted to explore artistically constantly.
Right. And why, right? Is it because he wrote those scripts after Dylan and maybe during Sunyi or after Sunyi, right? Mm-hmm. So is it some kind of wrestling with his own discourse of, because in Manhattan, for example, he was, although involved with a 17-year-old, which is just bizarre to think about a movie being made where the main character is having a sexual relationship with a child, and that they allowed that movie to get made. It's just, times are different.
Right. And he, in reality, because the narrative was that, well, I forget the gal, but someone said, that was about me, or it was inspired by me.
Right. It's Hemingway. I can't remember her first name, but so it's it's a theme. So is it also a pedophilic attraction that he has, that he was always born that way of being only attracted to children? Is it that it's that regressive type where, because when you watch Manhattan, you clearly see that the way he wrote it, the woman, the girl, the child that he is in a relationship with is naive and doesn't know the world the way that Woody Allen does, and kind of depends on, like, Woody Allen's almost like a dad to her, a mentor, someone that knows how to navigate the world. And is that pedophilic, or is that regressive in that he just feels safer with someone that doesn't understand the world very well? And if he's with someone that understands the world really well, he just feels scared because he just doesn't trust that that they really love him and that they're really going to stay with him, right? So, or both. Anyway, let's take a break. When we get back, let's answer some questions from the listeners. What do you say on this topic, Berto? What do you say?
Let's do it.
So, Berto, before we get into the questions, I want to give a shout out to some of our older, we were going to call this
OPPs.
The OPs.
And they gave us the word. It's old patron prizes.
Old patron. Who gave us that? Was it something?
It was a comment. Oh, so see, you don't like me reading comments on YouTube. Well, it was a comment on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Right. So last time we were debating what to call us, and so you said OPPs, and it is the old patron prizes. For today, we are going back to November 2015. These 5 people have been patrons of the podcast for almost 6 years. We have Joan from Minneapolis. We have Tina, I don't know where Tina is from. We have Joanna from Birmingham, Great Britain. Birmingham. But you know how they always sort of blend the syllables together, like Worcester and anyway.
Oh, yeah.
We have Kat from Coppell, Texas, and we have Nick from Seattle. We met Nick at our live event. Do you remember? We met Nick and
yes.
Nick's mother, I believe, and Nick was super great, really great person. So those are our OPPs for today.
OPPs, nice. Okay, and by the way, it was Nelson99 was the commenter.
All right. Well, Nelson, you and Berto effectively named the OPPs segment. All right, so getting back to my notes here. So Discord, I want to thank the Discord. So Discord, if you don't know, and you can click the link below to join Discord, is a forum where all the fans will talk. When you join our particular server, we'll talk about various things, mainly focused on the podcast. And we have a bunch of moderators who we're calling Discord Guardians, and Zach compiled. I asked Zach to ask the Discord people questions on the documentary, and they submitted these questions. And thank you to the Guardians, particularly Zach. Lola on Discord says, how sketchy was the assessment with Dylan while determining that she was lying? The whole thing seemed corrupt. The file notes were destroyed. They actually said she was lying, which no one could ever be 100% sure of. And then they weren't able to ever then they weren't available ever after the report came out to explain why the notes were destroyed. Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, okay. So my journey, by the way, I kept thinking that I was so convinced so early on this documentary that it was so clear that I kept thinking, no, this has got to be one of those documentaries where in the 4th episode, it turns around and it's like everything we thought we knew was wrong. And I kept waiting. I'm like, how is this going to pull back from this nosedive? And of course it never does. But in that part, I was like, okay, that's it. I mean, this is ridiculous. They come out and they do a press briefing with the accused. Okay, number one. Second, with the accused victimizer, right? Second, like the fact that none of them can testify. None of them can testify. The evidence, it's gone. All the notes are gone. And the language they use, it's just like, and the 9 hours or whatever of questioning.
Why would they do that? I mean,
it seems like he must have known someone that knew someone or knew the head of the department or something.
Okay.
Because that seems so corrupt on its face.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. Of course, the documentary is laying out in a certain way. So yeah, they said that she was lying, and the first thought and they quoted the report. It said she was lying. No one I know of. So I'm trained in psychological assessments and forensics. I actually minored, so to speak, in forensic psychology, and these kinds of not only assessments, but how do you report it? It's a big part of forensic psychology is how do you testify in court? How do you write up the report such that it has integrity and it will follow ethical and legal standards? You don't just say stuff like, well, I think that, the statement that you would make as a forensic psychologist, that child is lying about being sexually abused, is quite a statement. That for me and the people I worked with, I don't know about others, would never say that. How would we possibly know if a child was lying about it or not? So at the very best, or at the very most, we could say, it seems possible that the child is lying based on the following evidence. But you could never say, I know the child is lying. No one knows that. Because let's say that the child even admits, which I don't think Dylan ever did, I was lying. Well, if the child said it to begin with, and now they're saying they're lying, are they being coached to say they're lying? Are they trying to retract it? Are they trying to get out of feeling like they're in trouble? Are they trying to get out of testify? Are they trying to get out of coming to these multiple assessments? They don't like being questioned this way. You just can't know. And you also can't know if a child's telling the truth. So if a child is, laying out all the details, you can't say like, I know this child is. You just, all you can do as a forensic psychologist is just lay out the data and provide like your opinion based on that data, but you would never say, I know the child is lying. Now, I've seen this before, though, on some level, not with this particular issue, but forensic psychologists, this is why I didn't want to go into the field, I was getting trained by other forensic psychologists, people that work in the courts, and we'd be going over and when I was being trained as a psychologist, I'd already been a therapist and a professor for like 15 years. And so I wasn't just this naive student. I had written reports and assessed people. And so I would sometimes ask the forensic people, I'd say like, well, if a test in your interview, you have this finding, how do you know that you're actually accurate? And they didn't like those kinds of questions. They didn't, they said, well, the data shows blank. And I was saying, well, but how do you know for sure? I mean, they seem deluded by their own instruments because they are hired to do a job. The whole reason why they can pay their bills is because there's this notion out there that they know what they're doing. And if they were tentative, which is the reality that you should be, because how would you know? Then they're basically saying there's no point in hiring me. And there's no point in a lawyer hiring you, because no lawyer wants to hire a forensic psychologist that says, well, there's no way to tell. What a lawyer wants, the people who get hired, is when you say one way or the other. And you'll see that. You'll see in cases in court, you'll see one psychologist saying the husband is an abuser, and you'll see another psychologist saying the husband is absolutely not an abuser. And guess which lawyer hired the forensic psychologist? Well, so you'll see this happen. And instead of the two lawyers hiring different psychologists and both psychologists agreeing, we can't tell, because how could we?
Right.
But here's the data. He said this. Here's his psychological profile, which is mildly associated with abusing people. But of course, it's not a slam dunk. And some people lie. And, he was a little shifty, but who knows? Like, they don't say that usually, because
You know-
that's not going to get you money, right?
No, right. In a different lifetime. So as you know, I've been doing quality control for eraser heads
yeah.
for my whole life almost. But
Well, as long as you've been on the podcast, you've done
yeah,
it.
that's
Since the
true.
beginning.
But the thing is, quality assurance is kind of a science in its own right? You have to like consider, how do you verify that something is actually working correctly? I used to have this interview question because, I would hire people to do the quality assurance of the erasers. And I had this question where essentially it was like, hey, imagine you have this machine that is going to move along an infinite line in both directions. And it's going to, and the key is this. This machine needs to put marks randomly along the line. So it'll put a mark, then move randomly in one or the other direction, then put another mark, and then keep doing this forever. Infinite line, marks, forever. But there's one very important thing. It can never mark the same place twice, otherwise the universe ends. And so, of course, it's completely abstract, blah, 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 blah. But the reason I would ask this question is I'd say, like, how would, the question would be, how would you test that this machine is working properly?
You couldn't.
Exactly. And this is what I was always hoping that the more, mature quality assurance folk would tell me that, it's that question won't work and why. And then they would give me ways in which we could talk about, well, what's the actual expected reliability of the machine? How do we know the universe is going to end? And it would get very interesting. But there were a ton, sadly, of candidates that would say, well, I would run it for, maybe run it for a few weeks. I'm like, you're already losing. Like, what are you doing? But it's this kind of certainty.
Running it for 2 measurements is you're already putting the universe at risk.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's this kind of thinking that we can know things in the universe.
Right.
That is arrogant. But when you're talking about an infinite machine, I sort of get it. It might trip you up. But then when you're talking about a child's mind,
yeah,
to think that definitively,
yeah,
it's like, wow.
But we're talking about economics here. I mean,
yeah.
Money will cause politicians to do all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Money will cause us to look the other way when it comes to cigarettes or global warming, or the fact that I will not be able to the convenience of being able to drive to work, we will look the other way. And
Absolutely.
when there's there is a ton of money in forensics, that was often what was touted as like, well, there's a lot of money in this because you could charge $1,000 an hour for this kind of work.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Cause it's highly expert, and it takes a lot of time, and you could be a psychologist and still not qualified to do it. It probably takes 5-10 years post-grad before you can do it really on your own.
Wow.
And the ability to get up on the stand and, be able to respond to cross-examination or expert witness questioning by the opposing attorney, that's a whole other, it's not just the ability, it's a whole set of skills that you have to be able to do. And to do it well, or to not to do it well, to do it in a way that you'll get hired, you have to be, shall we say, arrogant. Now, I will also say that I know a lot of psychologists and forensic psychologists listening right now. I know you're one of the good ones, so I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying, in my experience, and I guess I'll also say that even the good ones would kind of rub me wrong in terms of like my own career choices,
Sure.
Because even the good ones, eventually they would say to me like, well, at some point you got to say something, you have to do, you got to do what you can, and you got to say something because that's what you're being hired to do. And yes, there's a lot of ambiguity, and there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of chances that you're off base, or you didn't get enough time to fully evaluate, or the individuals you're assessing are very good at tricking you. We have a lot of ways of trying to eliminate those possibilities, but at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, but that doesn't mean you don't say anything. You got to say something. Well, for me, I was like, well, I wouldn't want to say anything. I would want to go, I'd want to go to them and say like, I'm worried about saying anything to you because you'll take it as reality when I know that I don't know. And, that doesn't go over well in court, right? And lawyers are going to never hire you again. Anyway.
By the way, I should have been a forensic psychologist, because I would have been the opposite extreme. I would take one look at the situation and be like, yep, I've made my decision. I'm ready to testify.
Yeah. So so how this relates, again, getting back to what Lola was saying, is, this seeming corrupt assessment of Dylan, or at least problematic. Yeah, they said that she was lying, and although might seem unusual, it happens all the time. If you've been through a custody battle and you've seen both lawyers hire psychologists, you will hear some wildly different things in court. One expert will say this, the other, and so this notion that psychologists are somehow objective all the time or accurate is a bit of a deception that the industry, and again, I'm just hacking on forensic psychologists, but it's a bit, it's sort of like the polygraph test. There's plenty of people who have careers based on the fact that they are lie detectors. Well, these things don't work. Science has demonstrated polygraphs are not accurate. They're not reliable at all. And but for a polygraph, and polygraph people have at least been exposed to that research. What are they supposed to do? They've invested all this time and energy into becoming that career. Are they supposed to just give it up? No, they have to say that research the methodology wasn't right, or I know better anecdotally, anyway, my point is that I wasn't that surprised when in the documentary they were like, how would they know? Anyway, the destroyed notes thing is actually in the documentary, they were clearly saying there was something wrong with that. Another forensic psychologist or a lawyer or someone was saying, you never destroy your notes. I'm not quite so sure about that. I don't know the practices in that neck of the woods in that particular activity. So let me explain a little bit. You're talking with a child. So what they were saying in the documentary is there was I think a social worker, I believe, who was interviewing Dylan over 9 sessions or something, which is unusual, by the way. That part of it was strange. That you would need 9 individual sessions where the child from session 1 is saying, he touched me here, I touched him here. Oh. And then asking Dylan to repeat it over and over again in a 7-year-old, I believe she was 7. Anyway, that was also unusual and seems corrupt. At least it's a tick in the corrupt column. But the destroyed notes thing, it's debatable. So you're sitting down and you're asking all these questions, and you're taking notes as you're talking. Well, your notes might be completely discombobulated and very particular to you. Some people take notes that are kind of, legible, and some people take notes that are very particular to them. And then when they are out of the evaluation, they'll formally write up their notes or formally write up their findings. And then they'll discard their notes because their notes are so illegible that wouldn't make any sense to keep their notes. So in the documentary, they were saying you would never get rid of your notes. Well, you would never get rid of your findings. You would never get rid of what you discovered, but you might discard your temporary notes in that process. Again, I don't know if no one did that in that realm, in that neck of the woods, but I wouldn't be surprised if some people destroy their notes. So I'm not quite so sure as to, the slam dunk accusation of a problem with that detail.
But it was interesting that when the judge hearing the case of custody, that the judge pointed out that, hey, the thing you've brought up from this agency's got all these problems. One of the problems he or she listed was there's no notes. And I don't know if no notes means there were no recordings left, or or the files, there's no files. Or, I don't know. It seemed to be like there was something that they were expecting, at least at the judge level.
Well, okay. So here's the other thing that's a bit of a myth, that judges know what they're talking about. I've been in court when judges have no idea what they're talking. Now, maybe that judge did know what they were talking about, but I just didn't have enough information. Like, I would have to talk to the social worker that did the evaluation and say, like, you know, what's your story? And if they said, well, I know it's not standard that we do it this way, but I always did it this way. I would take notes, and then I would formally write my notes later, and those are still in the file. But my sort of haphazard notes, I always got rid of because they were nonsensical. And sometimes there was stuff on there that was a little speculative, and I didn't want that in the final report or the final notes that I included. I don't know if they would say that, or if you know, I just don't know. There's just too much variability in the practices that I've seen on that detail that I was like, I don't know if that's as much of a slam dunk as they're portraying. Maybe it is in that neck of the woods, but it wouldn't be for me and the people and the assessments that I did. Anyway, okay, so why, if something was wrong there, here are the speculations. So you've already speculated about one, that there's essentially fraud, that they had a back deal.
Did a press conference with the guy.
Yeah, but
would you do a press conference? You know, you're hired by a court to do something, and then you go and you do a press conference with one of the parties.
It's certainly not couth. It doesn't look good, but you know, if you're wanting to advertise your agency as a viable assessment, you know, who knows? It doesn't look very professional, but you know, it happens. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, you know, at least in part sometime. Anyway, so was it fraud? Could be. Was it bribery? Could be. Was it backroom deals, friends, handshake deals? Could be. It also could just be incompetence. Don't underestimate the amount of incompetence in any field. Could the individuals who were doing the evaluation just have no idea what they're doing? Yeah, that happens all the time. This assumption that, like, well, it's the Yale, New Haven, it must be. No, there's plenty of incompetence in the world. Who knows? I don't know. Now, another speculation I had while I was watching it was the organization that was assessing, and the psychologists and all the other people, terrified of Woody Allen's lawyers suing them? You know, Woody Allen's lawyers were well-funded and very good. Mia Farrow's lawyers were not. You know, Mia Farrow was basically just like, look, the truth will prevail. And Woody Allen was like, all guns ablaze with all my lawyers, right?
Well, not only that, I think in this case, that assessment, wasn't it ordered by the prosecutor?
I don't remember. It probably was. That would be the standard. So. That would be standard. And so why do you bring that up?
Well, because it wasn't even, why am I bringing that up? Oh, just to emphasize the point that, it's not like Mia had this crack team of Johnny Cochrans, you know?
Right.
It's like, she's there like, what are we going to do here? And then this prosecutor is like trying to do their best and be like, well, we'll order this, we'll order that. And the prosecutor is a state actor. Right.
With a large caseload and not the funds, obviously, that Woody Allen has thrown around. Right. It's similar with O.J. Simpson trial, for example. You are going up against people who have scores of assistants that can do all sorts of research and, you know. Anyway, so would you maybe put pressure as Woody Allen's lawyers on the organization and say, hey, by the way, you know, I'm just going to throw it out here. If something you do is a little off kilter and we don't like the results, you better believe there's going to be a lawsuit and we're going to get you. So watch what you're doing. And while the prosecutor isn't saying anything like that, right? Can we imagine that happening? Yeah, or at least the implication, you know. It's all in the implication, right, Berto?
That's right.
And so might that have happened? Or might the organization just been preemptively terrified of Woody Allen's lawyers? There's a huge incentive there of like, if we sweep this under the rug, everything will go away and we can just go back to our regular jobs and not worrying about all the press conferences and losing jobs and scrutiny. And we, you know, whereas if we find Woody Allen to be maybe guilty and Dylan to be maybe telling the truth, then this will become a protracted legal problem for the next 7 years of our lives. Do we really want that? I've seen people make decisions in my field influenced by those factors. Also, bias for Woody Allen because he was famous. At that time, he was a beloved figure, a very, it's hard, people who might be a little younger might not remember or might not know, but Woody Allen was just a huge figure in the 70s and 80s and 90s, particularly 70s and 80s. I mean, just a gigantic figure, and it wouldn't be unusual for people to be kind of starstruck and just like, he wouldn't do that. He's a nice guy,
Yep. By the way, it reminds me, there was that moment where he's being interviewed and he says, look, the whole thing doesn't make sense. I'm 57. Why would I choose this time of my life to all of a sudden become a pedophile?
Right. So actually, Lola asked about that. Lola said, let's see. Let's see. The doc. Wait. What did Douglas? Oh, I'm reading all the different questions that. Well, anyway, Lola brought that point up, and yeah, that's a misnomer that people can't do that. I mean, one, you could hide your pedophilia until you're in your 50s. Two, you could be either hiding it by not acting on it or hiding your victims, hiding your victimization of others. Also, some people do develop personality changes later in life. There's actually, and this isn't, the same thing, but there's a medication that you can take for Parkinson's that can, in some people, create compulsions. It's usually gambling, but it sometimes can be sex, and it sometimes can be child abuse. So now there's debate as to whether or not they always had it in them, but when you change the chemistry of the brain, we've known that, or you have a stroke, for example, or surgery. There was a case that was in a podcast, I think This American Life, a long time ago, where this guy had surgery on his brain. And after, because he had, I think, maybe, I can't remember why, but they took out a portion of his brain, and he was doing pretty well afterwards, but he found himself just in massive compulsion to abuse children sexually.
Oh, I remember seeing a video about this.
Yeah. And now you could debate, was he just hiding it before and now he can't, who knows? But anyway, the point is that this notion of why that all abusers who are caught when they're 55 have a known track record going back to when they were 20 years old is, obviously silly.
So,
right?
To me, when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes you look more guilty in my mind, because it's a total straw man argument he's setting up, right? No one actually said, it's not like Mia or anyone else said, what we believe is that all of a sudden Woody Allen developed in his 50s pedophilic tendencies. That's not the argument. I don't care how long, how soon, whatever. No one's bringing it up. You're bringing it up as like, oh, you see, like it doesn't make sense from this angle. It's almost, it's one thing if I said, let's say you accuse me of like, hey man, I think you're probably a robber, like you steal things. And I say, well, look, I have been alive for 46 years. I've certainly never been accused or convicted of stealing things. So what is your evidence? Okay, fine. But imagine that all of a sudden you're like, hey, I saw you eating vanilla ice cream the other day. And I go, wait, why would I choose to wait till I'm 46 to like vanilla ice cream? Liking things is not something you can prove whether I did or didn't. So it's like, who is to know what he predilected, what he has done in secret, what he wanted to do? It's just ridiculous. So I think him bringing that up, if someone was really innocent, I would have not expected that statement. I would have expected the statements like, no, absolutely, this didn't happen. No, of course not. Totally, of course I expect those statements. But I would not expect these weird straw man arguments like, why would I do that when I'm 57? It struck me as really odd.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, if you're accused of something like that and you have no hard evidence that you did it or that you didn't do it, then you're going to have to resort to circumstantial questionable evidence. If he had the definitive proof that he didn't do it, he would obviously present that if he didn't do it.
Right. So in that sense, I would expect things like, hey, look, I've been around all the following sets of children at all these various ranges of their life. Let's go interview all these people.
Yeah.
And they will give you accounts.
And
look at my dating pattern. Look at my this. Look at my this. Look at my this. Circumstantial.
And I think, well, I don't think he worded it that way, but I'm pretty sure he does point those things out,
But I would say like, well, no, that's what we're doing. And actually it's looking pretty weird because you've now dated, started having sex with an underage girl and then married her. And then you were dating another underage girl. You write movies about it. And what?
But not definitive proof other than Dylan's account. Course. Now, what Lola on Discord also asked, what would a psychologist look for in a case suspected of false allegations or implanting false memories, as Mia was accused of doing to Dylan? Does this case have or have not those markers, and how clearly does it not have or have such markers? So, I don't know, because I don't have access to the reports or the evaluations, so I can't know in the case of Dylan. They talked briefly about it in the documentary, but these kinds of evaluations are pretty complicated. But the things that we tend, and I don't do this kind of work. I've done it in the past, and I've worked alongside a lot of people, so I'm just speaking from that place. But the sort of things that you're looking for when you're evaluating a situation like this as a psychologist are you're doing a full, or as much of a full evaluation of the child as possible, not just the issue of the events that are being discussed, but what's their personality like? How mature are they? What are their general morals? Do they have any attachment problems? Do they have ADHD? Do they have early bipolar? Do they, are they, how are their emotional expressions? Are they generally stable? Do they generally tell the truth in session? What are the reports by other people? You're trying to piece together a psychological profile that is inherently circumstantial, but can inform the powers that the people that are making the decision as to whether or not it's the person's innocent or guilty or telling the truth. For example, with Dylan, they were looking into how consistent her story was. And apparently they had to ask her 9 different times, which is unusual, or 9 different sessions, probably several times, but they probably asked her 100 times. So so not only would a lawyer do this, but a psychologist might as well. Just kind of, can you tell this story again? And if it changes wildly, because the thing is that when a child is making something up, then it will morph over time sometimes. But when you're dealing with children, one, they will morph things over time just kind of naturally. And 2, if you keep asking them the same question over and over again, even an adult, they might perceive, I must not be answering the question quite right. And this can actually go 2 different ways. You can either cause a victim to recant their story when they shouldn't be, or you can cause someone that isn't a victim to believe they were a victim. These are the implanted memories where you ask a child, were you abused? And the child says no. And you say, well, are you sure you weren't abused? And the child says, what do you mean? Well, where did he touch you on this doll? Where did he touch you? And the child says, he didn't touch me. And then you say, are you sure he didn't touch you? And so this is a case where the child wasn't abused. Are you sure that he didn't touch you? And the child's like, yes. And then you bring him in next week. You say, so where did he touch you on the doll? I don't know. He touched me here. And the kid's just like, I don't know what you're asking. And the kid just points at like the head. Oh, so he did touch you. And the child's like, oh crap. I just said that he touched me. Because I just wanted to play. I didn't want to be asked these questions anymore. So crap, I just sort of, and you're 7, you don't know how to answer. And so yeah, he touched me on the head. Okay. So last week you were lying to me when you said he didn't touch you. Is that right? And the kid's like, fuck, what do I say? Kids say all sorts of shit. So the kid's like, yeah, I was lying last week. Yeah. and the kid's just like, can we just move on so I can play Legos with you or something? I don't want to answer these questions here. And you say, okay, well, where else did he touch you? And the kid's like, oh, so is that what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to say that he touched me other places? Okay, fine. He touched me on the butt, and you keep doing this over and over again. And eventually the kid will believe that they were being touched in that way. And you can actually, again, do this to adults as well. We've shown this through lots of research. Our memories are extremely malleable. We are not tape recorders. We are not hard disk drives. We're
not YouTube videos.
We are not YouTube videos. We are, the thing I always say is, have you ever seen a brain? It does not look like a hard drive. It looks like a pile of mud, and so the fact that pile of mud isn't precise should not surprise you. So, the fact that you forget where your keys are sometimes should alert you to the fact that your brain isn't exactly precise in its ability to remember things and remember that you didn't remember things. Anyway, so it can go both ways. And so you have to be extremely careful as an evaluator that you're not implanting memories, you're not changing memories, and it's really hard to know. And you can never really know because a kid will say lots of things, especially under that circumstance, because the kid isn't comfortable usually. The kid knows that there's awkwardness in the air. There's like, why am I here? And usually try to play games at first and make the kid feel comfortable, but there's always discomfort. The kid would rather be home playing games or something. And so that puts a lot of pressure. And so there's a lot of, but anyway, the kinds of things you're looking for are consistency. You might look for a tendency to be fantastical or to make stuff up. And that was their contention, was that Dylan had a pattern of making up stories that she, when they just asked her about other kinds of things, she would include details that were clearly not possible. Like she would talk about, I don't know, spaceships or something. And you would say, oh, she generally lives in a fantasy world. And so thus, how can we trust what she's saying? Now, you wouldn't say she's lying.
Right.
Someone with a active or overly active fantasy orientation can still be abused and tell the truth. It's not like every single thing that comes out of Dylan's mouth is a fantasy. We all understand that. So, but anyway, yeah, so that's how I'll answer that question. I could go on, and there's a whole system of how to evaluate this in kids, but just know that it's hard, and you look for certain markers, you mark it down, you write it in your report, and you give an opinion of just like, well, it's in my experience, it's possible. That would have been much more of a common response that I have seen, is something like, given the pattern and these 5 factors that I observed, here's my data, it seems quite likely or possible that she was abused, or it seems quite possible that she is making it up, but I can't know for sure, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to rattle off the evidence for and against that I compiled. And I'm not an expert on this, but this is what I compiled. So the evidence that he did it, and this is from not just the documentary, but from other sources. Evidence that Woody Allen did it. Dylan Farrow has consistently told the child since childhood. Usually this indicates the truth, and she has almost nothing to gain and a lot to lose. So as with most cases like this, not only is it likely that Dylan is telling the truth, but we almost have a moral duty to believe her. Why would we disbelieve her? It basically comes down between Woody's word and Dylan's word. And why would Dylan want to ruin Woody Allen's? There's no reason why she would, especially now, the only reason why she would come forward is if she's like, there's an injustice here. Something's wrong. And I want the world to be right. And so I'm willing to incur all the hatred and all the denial and all the re-traumatization to make the world right. It's usually what's happening.
Yeah.
The other reason why we would say that he did it is that Dylan, in the documentary, she had a real classic PTSD reaction when she was recalling the story. Do you remember that moment, Berto?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It was brutal.
Yeah, that's hard to fake. And it's possible she was faking it. It's possible that she was reacting to an implanted memory, but it's much more likely that that physiological reaction was absolutely a reaction to the trauma, not just the sexual trauma, but the emotional coercion trauma that she went, because, you know, it wasn't just that he sexually abused her, it was that he dominated her life and her body and her brain, not just sexually, but just in general. And they had footage of that, you know, all that one-on-one time. And that was traumatizing for her. And you saw her have a very classic PTSD reaction. And I feel like with all the reality TV I've been watching lately, I've gotten, or at least I believe, that I've become a little bit of I have a little bit of a skill that's developed over the past couple of years of detecting faking of affect on television, you know, because it obviously serves some people to do that. And it didn't ring any of those bells. Could she be faking? Yeah, absolutely, but it didn't look like it to me. Woody Allen admits to having a relationship with one of the other children, Soon-Yi. So it's like, it's not a crazy accusation at that point. It's like, well, we have a pattern here of you having sex with your stepchildren or children. And
with witnesses talking about that was potentially happening before she was even of age.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the chance that it started when they say it started, especially with how much they were hanging out. Yeah. I mean, let's just even say that it's true, that they never had sex before she was 21, which I think is their account of it. Well, they were hanging out a lot when she was a teenager.
Yep.
So at the very least, it's, you know, even retrospectively, anyway, point is that's at least quote unquote evidence that meaning circumstantial evidence that he did it because.
And by the way, not to mention that if we rewind the clock, the whole idea is that the reason why the accusation is not real is because Mia Farrow felt scorned by the Soon-Yi thing, right? And so then I guess I would expect to see that Mia Farrow has been unable to move on from the Soon-Yi devastation.
Right.
And that her life really has revolved around that aspect.
Yeah.
And that seems completely opposite to the reality.
Right. And she very much after the relationship ended, you know, before, you know, she had clearly a lot of romantic relationships, you know, some marriages and some not before Woody Allen. After Woody Allen, no relationships, which is another tick in the column of Mia Farrow's telling the truth, because if it was truly a lie and a manipulation on Mia Farrow's part, why would she trick herself into believing that her child was abused such that she didn't ever want to take that risk again? You know, it just was extremely consistent with, if we believe the documentary, that Mia, after Woody Allen, would be like, well, I let this man into my house and he abused my children, and I don't have the ability to make that detection. And so I guess I have to deny myself that need for the rest of my life, and I'm never going to date again, you know, and that's what she did.
And it's not like any of the audio of the calls, which, by the way, didn't I understand right? The audio we were hearing of the calls was taped by Woody Allen.
Oh, I don't know.
That seemed to be the thing, because that was what came out. And in fact, there's one call where she says, "Are you taping this?" He's like, "No, I don't even know how to use those things." And then the thing cuts out. Or he's like, "Oh, give me a second." And then it's a different call where he's talking maybe to his lawyer, saying like, "Yeah, I'm recording right now." It's bizarre. But in those conversations, and maybe we didn't hear all of them, but certainly they didn't seem to revolve around Soon-Yi and, "But I want you back," or "I can't believe what you did to me." You know, it's all about her, about the little girl.
Well, and Mia pleading with Woody Allen to not go to the media anymore. She's like, "Could you please not drag the kids through this? Let's just keep it on the DL, you know?" If you were truly a scorned lover, you would relish in the fact that this was in the media, right? Where it was seemingly, from the documentary, the opposite. Also, Mia just seems like a saint. So
I thought that too as I was watching it. I was like, oh my God, this person is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I literally, while I was watching it with my wife, exclaimed, "She's a saint." She's like
she's going around the world, like
she's like
helping with polio and oh my God,
and to literally save the lives of children around the world and adopt them and bring them into a home. Now, okay, so now the evidence that he didn't do it. Let's go into this now. He claims he didn't do it. Okay, that's evidence. It's not fantastic evidence, but it's evidence.
Well, what I was saying is, unlike Roman Polanski, who's like, he's not claiming, no, that didn't happen. He's just saying, well, yes, but it's not as bad as you think. I don't think that's a bad thing. Plus, she was into it.
Right.
Now, whatever we feel about that, he's admitting it.
Right. He claims that Dylan was coached. That it does happen, particularly when there are custody battles, particularly when there are breakups. There is actually a pretty high prevalence of it. And it's something that people don't often talk about when you are, going through a real nasty divorce and you just hate your ex-spouse and you'll do anything to protect your kids. And whether it's a real threat or not, you believe that your ex is a bad parent. And well, if I accuse my ex of sexual abuse, this whole problem will go away. And it's for the better. So I'm going to tell little Bobby, hey, remember when Daddy was in the pool with you that one time and he touched you down there? And it, in your head as a parent, you're like, I know it was accidental, but I could use this against it, And so all we got to do is just get Bobby to say that he was touched. And I don't want to throw my ex into prison. I just want this custody battle to go away. And then you make the report, and then forensic people start to show up, and they ask you more questions, and you start elaborating, and then you start actually kind of freaking out, and you start pressuring Bobby to say a little bit more, and this happens. Is it the majority of cases where these come forward? No, but it's a thing in custody battles. And did it seem like Mia Farrow was capable of that? No. Did it seem like that was even really a factor? That because by the time by the whole time this problem was going on between Woody Allen and Mia Farrow, Soon-Yi was an adult, so there wasn't any power that Mia could have if Soon-Yi wanted to be involved with Woody. Mia knew she couldn't do anything about that. So there wasn't seemingly anything at stake that Mia would be motivated to somehow tear him down in that way. But, it can happen.
And it seemed like the timing was, first came the accusation about Dylan, which, by the way, Mia Farrow claims that she wasn't aware that the therapist would have to report, right? Like she sent Dylan to the therapist. And then she wasn't aware that the therapist would have to report, but the therapist reported, and that's how the thing started.
Right, and then the state prosecutor takes over.
Exactly, and then Woody Allen comes out and says, "Oh, I've got an announcement to make. I'm in love with Soon-Yi, and that's why you're here." It wasn't like Woody Allen left Mia. The press gets a hold of it. Oh, what's happening? Oh yeah, I'm running away with Soon-Yi, and then these accusations start coming out.
Right. You have to wonder if that hadn't come out, would Woody Allen even have lasted with Soon-Yi? Or does he need Soon-Yi as his like very weird alibi? Because it kind of works as an alibi in a sense in terms of his scrapped together narrative that Mia Farrow is upset, Yeah, and I just remember in the 90s, people saying, Woody Allen's he's dating his daughter, and then other people said, no, it's not really his daughter. It's the adopted daughter of his ex-girlfriend. It was always sort of said that way, and
I remember that. I remember thinking, okay, I guess that's all right.
Right, he's not related to the child. It's kind of a distant. In your head, the way it was portrayed, it was like it'd be like Berto if you had an ex-girlfriend from like 15 years ago, and she had an adult adopted daughter, and you just happened to fall in love with that. You just randomly bumped into this woman at a party, and then you're you're the adopted daughter of my ex from 15 years ago, but we fell in love. What are we going to do? Oh, well, this kind of looks weird. That's the way it was portrayed. That's not how it was.
No. He was there the whole time. He even called out, even in his own words. I found something very interesting from the moment that she came into the family, like when she was 10, basically.
Right. Yeah, as a child.
And totally. It's just not consistent.
He was, at the very least, a father figure. Say like a friend of the family as a father figure to Soon-Yi.
Right.
And quite possibly, you could make the argument, a stepfather, which is a father. And whether Soon-Yi saw him that way or not, I don't know. But, the documentary and all the home footage, it just shows it, that he was over there. It's particularly with Dylan, right? If he wasn't Dylan's father, what was he? Or if he wasn't Dylan's essential father figure, what was he? Right. So if he was just like a friend of the family, then why was he
uncle?
Yeah. And Soon-Yi was a sibling of Dylan's, you know what I mean? Anyway, like Ronan Farrow, one of the kids he's spoken out about this. He'll be like, yeah, Soon-Yi is both my sister and my stepmother.
Yeah. Oh man.
But anyway, so now, again, evidence against that people will say is the accusers and the documentarians are accusing him for personal gain, fame, money. Dylan doesn't seem like she's interested in those things, but, those are the accusations, possible motivation. The Michael Jackson supporters will definitely point to that as a reason why the fame and money is the reason why they would accuse. One of the adopted children said that he never did it, but that claim seemed extremely dubious given that the other child, I think it was Moses, was like 9 years old himself at the time, and looking back, he's like, no, it never happened. It's like, how would he know? But,
and he actually, at first he believed, and he wrote a letter saying how he felt betrayed, and then he recanted it. Yeah. But I mean, and I'm not blaming him. Like, poor little kid, also traumatized.
Right.
Traumatized in his own way. He had this father figure, hero of his.
Yeah.
And then he feels betrayed. And then he loves the guy, though.
Yeah.
So he's like, wait, no, this can't be. And I'm sure they've had all sorts of conversations. And Woody Allen, like, look, if I hadn't watched this and I'm just having a conversation, the guy sounds really convincing. That's his skill, his shtick is he can, do all this little talking and then why would this happen? Like, and all of a sudden you're going along with this little convoluted train of thought and you're watching his movie and you're thinking, wow, yeah, I kind of see his points. And there you are.
Yeah.
And so the guy can be super convincing. Imagine if you're a kid. Imagine if you grew up thinking of him as a father.
Yeah. Even if he wasn't convincing, when you are and many of you out there might have been in a situation like this. And Berto, you not precisely, but you had a similar kind of environment of, I have a choice right now, given what I'm experiencing. I can either go with what everyone else is saying and essentially lose a parent, which I don't want. It's just terrible. I'm essentially like self-abandoning myself. Or I can go into denial and just believe that it's not true so that I can have a parent. We will do a lot of things far more sacrificial to retain a parental relationship than that. And so is that possible? Yeah, but is he telling the truth? Does he have... Soon-Yi also defends Woody Allen. But again, how would she know about behind the scenes Dylan situation? There's claims that Mia Farrow was abusive. That's not evidence that Woody Allen was innocent, but it does indicate character issues similar to Woody Allen's character being called into question. Those accusations are, hotly debated in their own family.
Not only that, dude, if that was the case, then why the hell did Woody Allen never mention that, or why didn't he care? Didn't he care so much about the boy? What's his name?
Moses.
Didn't he care? Moses. Didn't he care? So didn't he see any of this? How come he didn't see any of this abuse happening? Why didn't he step in? Why isn't he? Anyways, it's...
Yeah. Woody Allen was investigated by the Yale New Haven Hospital Sexual Abuse Clinic, and they quote, said, "It is our opinion that Dylan was not sexually molested by Mr. Allen." Again, how would they know that? But that was their opinion. We don't have access to the data. Woody Allen was investigated by the New York State Department of Social Services, and, quote, "No credible evidence was found that the child named in this report has been abused or maltreated," unquote. Again, how would they know that? But we don't know how they came to that conclusion. So a lot of experts both saying Dylan was not abused and Woody Allen is not an abuser. Again, how would they know that? But they claim that. We don't have access to those data. Doctors examined Dylan and found no evidence of abuse. That's evidence, for the people that are pro Woody Allen, they'll point to that. But that's not unusual, because what physical, a physician examining Dylan, what evidence, there are signs, which I won't go into for the graphical nature of it, of abuse happening to someone. But the fact that there isn't evidence doesn't mean it didn't happen, right?
Especially because the description of what was done to her, which I again won't mention,
wouldn't leave any kind of injury.
Exactly. It should probably wouldn't. And oh, by the way, this is another reason why it is so difficult. But as I was listening to it, I'm like, well, look, if they were going to fabricate something, like, you would imagine it would be even worse, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, Berto. I thought the same thing of when people fabricate, not always, because sometimes they're trying to, keep it, especially in a case when they're trying to deal with a custody thing, like, because the way I role play that one person, they're just like, I just want this to go away. I don't want to cause a big uproar. I just want to use a little bit of a influence here to kind of push this person away. So I'll kind of intimate. So there's situations like that. But often when there are false reports, it gets pretty fantastical, because it's like, well, if I'm going to lie, I'm going to really go for it. And even as an adult, you might say like, well, I'm going to really go for it because I don't want there to be any ambiguity as to whether or not something happened. But the story remained, although definitively abusive, fairly non-sensational, right?
And look at, okay, so let's use the logic, right? Like we were saying, hey, why would I have 57? Okay, well, let's take it this other way. So imagine Mia Farrow sitting there talking to, I guess, the babysitter going, hey, can I get you to say that, let's see, what could we make up? Oh, I get it.
Right.
He had his head in her lap. Wait, what? Like doing what? No, just there, like just kind of, I guess, breathing in and out. Wait, what? Who does that? What are you talking about?
That one wasn't as definitive, or that wasn't as sort of as much evidence as, I think one of the friends of the family saw the two of them in bed naked or something.
No, absolutely. No, but I'm using the other one as evidence of like, why would you make that up?
Right.
Because the thing is that if you don't actually have some sort of weird, well, okay, I don't want to use these kind of terms, but if you don't have some patterns that are maybe unusual, then you probably wouldn't put your head in the lap of a 7-year-old and breathe in and out. Like what? Naked, like, okay. But would Mia Farrow make that? Like, now I'm really questioning the logic. So I would expect things like, the made up story would check out. The logic would check out. Like, oh yeah, he put his finger in her. Okay, fair enough, blah, blah. But these other things, I'm like, wait, what? And that's the kind of thing that that points to, okay, there are some very, very, very difficult attachment and psychological issues that are going on with him, where he actually feels connected to her by doing something that almost isn't sexual in nature, except it kind of is in this bizarre way.
Right. Yeah, and we don't know the full extent of because they actually didn't describe it. Right. I think for reasons that I think have to do with maybe Dylan's desire for at least some privacy, and also her PTSD. Actually, just a side note, when I saw her have the PTSD reaction, I thought, is she getting proper treatment? Because if I was treating someone like her, I would tell her, look, until you are habituated sufficiently to these stories, you can't talk about them in a documentary. You shouldn't even be thinking about them because you're going to harm yourself. And you saw that harm happen during the documentary.
I think she was told that. I think she talked about being told that. And she said, because remember, there was a moment in which she said that she was advised by her therapist not to bring this back up and not to get re-traumatized.
Well, you watched it with much more like attention than I did.
Maybe because no pun intended, it touched me deeply. You know, it was like,
How so?
you know, it's like kid traumatization, which I went through. So it's just, I was sitting there thinking, just a lot of the same thoughts we've talked about before. Man, these little kids, you know, I was 5, she was probably, I don't know how soon it started. She was at least 7. And you don't know what's up. You don't know what the world is. And all of a sudden you're confronted with something. And you know how she was talking about how she felt so guilty for a long time, thinking like, why do I feel abused? Like, clearly nothing that bad happened to me, because I hear these other horror stories that are way worse. So what right do I have to feel? And I could relate to that, because I think I've mentioned that for the longest time, I didn't even think it was abuse at all. I thought, in fact, I used to think it was sort of kind of cool that had happened to me. Up until my probably 19 or 20, I felt that way. I felt like, oh, well, no, that was a cool thing that happened to me. Right. It certainly never would have been like, oh, woe is me, I was a victim. And, you know, because I had no idea the trauma and damage that it was going to cause, you know?
Yeah. 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 When we are in a vacuum and we have a society that denies the notions that would help a child, you know, when a child is being bullied at school, there's messages of there are bullies in the world. There are shows on Hannah Montana, for example, episodes about bullying. There's maybe even an anti-bullying campaign at school where you watch a video or something, and you're given at least a chance to understand that as a victim of bullying, that it's not your fault. When it comes to this sort of thing, we're so busted up about sexuality that we either have minimal education or exposure, or we flat out give messages to everyone that if there's any sexual involvement or activity, that there's something extremely shameful about it and there's something seriously wrong with you. So all these victims, including yourself, walking around, because if you had been pushed down the stairs by your babysitter, you knew that you could run to your father and say, she pushed me down the stairs. Yeah. But when she does this sort of thing to you, you're like, what am I supposed to do? I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to tell anyone, because I'm pretty sure this is naughty stuff that you're not supposed to tell your parents. And no one seems to be talking about this sort of thing. So I guess I'm just not going to talk about it. And then you have to make up a story in your mind to cope, which is it was cool, rather than admitting what it also felt. I mean, it did feel like that. It did feel cool to you, but it also felt
it didn't. Not at all. Like the actual situation of it, because I still have the pictures in my mind, and it never felt good. It never felt right. It always confused me. Yeah, it felt gross, and I never understood what was happening. But the halo around it was, oh, cool. She likes me.
That's the line she gave you. That's the vibe she gave you.
Yeah. And I looked up to her. I thought she was pretty. She was older. She was cool. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. She likes me. And that must mean we could be boyfriend, girlfriend or something. I mean, now I'm adding words, but it's like this sense of, ooh, and I'm in a secret club. But the actual flashes I have, and I don't mean just like me interpreting them now as an adult. I mean, I remember the feelings and thoughts in some of those moments, and it was just confusing. Like, what am I doing? What is that? Like, it never made sense. It was never like, that was not it. It's just everything surrounding it was like, oh, cool. Yeah. It's secret. Cool. I'm in the club.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about you going through that little Berto, little 5-year-old Berto.
Yeah, man. And so then I was sitting there watching it. It must have been similar for Dylan, where she's going, what is going on? Oh, but I guess this is daddy time. In fact, she said, like, maybe this is what daddies do, you know?
Right, yeah. She said she went over to some other friend's house. Yeah. And she was like, your dad doesn't like just glom onto you? Yeah. I thought that's what dads did.
That's what daddies do.
Like, your dad just watches TV and doesn't bother you? Like, I didn't know that daddies were like that. Yeah, it's just heartbreaking to hear her talk about that. And all the lines of evidence, right? That line of evidence, the observational evidence, the video evidence, like it all, builds this pretty solid picture of the conceptualization that I was saying, where it was just a complete obsession with her. And anyway, final question, Berto. Should we be able to watch his movies?
I gotta be honest, man. I was looking for reasons early in the documentary. I'm like, well, I can. By the time I was done, because I'll tell you why. See, with Michael Jackson, maybe, you know what? Who knows? But I'll tell you what. I was thinking, okay, what he did was terrible, and how traumatic to that little girl. But I could in some ways still feel empathy for the guy if I knew, well, he was abused too, or he had these traumatic things. And then he ended up, coming out and saying, yeah, this happened, and now he's in treatment and stuff. And like, I would feel for him somewhat, But it's the opposite. If this happened, then he's a monster, because it's not just that he did that. Is that he's turned this whole family into a mess and accused like the mom of the worst things, and taken her daughter and married her, and like the whole thing makes him a monster.
Right. So let's say he did it, there are various different ways he could have tried to extract himself or protect himself, but he decided to attack Mia.
Yeah, psychopathically, dude.
Right. He could have just said, look, it didn't happen. I don't know why Mia's saying it. It didn't he could have just, and he probably still would have gotten out of it, but he didn't do that. He systematically, and they portray this in documentary, we don't know the accuracy, but it seemed that there's evidence that he actually told Mia, no, I'm not going to go to the press. And then he went to the press, let's not go to the press. And then he goes to the press. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Well,
so now if I'm wrong, if the documentary is biased and this was the thing, and it turns out this is all one big mind game and everything, well, apologies to Mr. Allen. But if I am to believe the data in front of me, which seems compelling, then F him, man. I'm done. I will not miss it, because now every time I watch one of his stupid movies, I'm going to sit there seeing that abuse happening. Yeah. And it's even worse in the sense because, like, I've told you, I think that there are now some Michael Jackson songs that I can't listen to without getting creeped out. But there are some where I still kind of turn...
Pretty Young Thing.
Yeah, but there are some that I still look the other way because I guess their songs are so freaking good. But I don't have to, like, look at someone doing things that are basically kind of creepy in the first place. I don't know. Yeah. I maybe it's too soon, but I felt towards the end of that documentary, I was like, I'm done. I believe this, and I'm done.
I mean, I was still trying to evaluate that, but hearing you talk about it, yeah, I mean, I see that. I'm convinced by your take on that. It makes no sense.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, if you really just think, you just really have to think, okay, what if he did it, which it seems like he did, he's a monster, and how can you watch his face in a movie? Now, he's not in all of his movies. So what about the movies where he's not in it? Like Midnight in Paris with Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
Can you watch that movie, or is the man behind it?
I don't know.
Bothersome?
Those are always great questions. It's hard. I will say this once again, and I don't want this to sound wrong. It's just I'm not bothered by the acts, because even though the acts are horrible and poor little girl and all these things, I'm like, well, if that had come out and he had like fessed up and really embraced the fact that he's damaged and that he needed help and then apologized, and it's not like it excuses it. He probably should have served time, done whatever, right? But since not only did that not happen, but it was the extreme opposite, that's where I have to leave that short. But as far as like movies that he wrote or whatever, I don't know. I don't know. I just can't look at him right now.
Yeah. And I haven't talked about this yet, but I feel like it's important for me to say that I'm was or am a huge Woody Allen movie fan. I in my office at Antioch, I had various different posters, and you could guess some of them. There's a Star Wars poster. There's a Clockwork Orange poster. There's a Logan's Run poster, and an Annie Hall poster. Big Lebowski poster.
Yeah.
Annie Hall had a huge effect on me when I was a kid. When I saw it, there had been so many copycats of Annie Hall, but it was the first of its kind. Almost every rom-com you've ever seen has its roots in that movie. Any movie or any TV show that's about just youngish 20, 30 something people that don't have kids living their lives, just the scenes that Woody Allen wrote and created, and Diane Keaton, and the vibe of it is, it holds up today. You watch Annie Hall today, it's still good. And it was made in 1977 when a lot of crappy movies were being made, Now the 70s were kind of a golden era of movies, but in terms of rom-coms and those kinds of movies, you'd be hard-pressed to find a movie that even comes close to Annie Hall. Maybe, The Graduate. But these are very particular movies, And
incredible talent.
And then the next year, he makes Interiors, which is a complete departure from Annie Hall. Interiors is a very depressing movie about a enmeshed family. And when I saw this movie in my 20s, it deeply affected. It's one of the lesser known movies, but if you're interested in the cinema, it gives me chills. The cinematography. So in Annie Hall, you don't think of cinematography. You think of acting, you think of writing, you think of storytelling, you think of humor, you think of rom-com stuff. Interiors is a completely different style of movie. That was, the true auteur, and someone who could make Christopher Nolan makes a movie every 5 years. Woody Allen makes a movie every 9 months.
It's crazy.
And half of them are genius movies, you know what I mean? Considered, to be, or a third anyway.
Could we take some solace, some comfort in hoping that he had not yet become a monster at those ages?
Well, 1979, he makes Manhattan with Mariel Hemingway,
Yeah.
And
okay, but could we, again, I'm just,
he hadn't done anything horrible.
Well, not only that, he was dating a 17-year-old, but, right. Different times, different mores, people actually kind of look sideways at those things, whatever.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're looking for an excuse to be able to watch his movies, I guess that's...
I'm more actually, what I'm thinking is, at which point in the history of a human being do we cut them off? Because clearly, especially if you're a parent, right? Like, imagine you're a parent of someone who became a psycho killer or something, right? But you still have those memories of them as a child.
Well, you're a parent. It's completely different, right?
Or maybe you're not a parent. Maybe you just knew you were the preschool teacher of that kid, that little kid.
So you're saying, like, Woody Allen let's say there was a moment where he crossed the line with Dylan, and that was the first time he'd ever done anything. We don't know that, but let's say that was... So are you saying that everything he made before that date is okay for us to watch, and everything after is not?
Yeah, I'm more making a mental point for myself about, when do I start loathing this individual in their history? Do I go back to their very inception as a baby, or do I pick a point in time? And I guess for me, the point in time is the moment when he was confronted by Mia Farrow, and he ran and he grabbed pitchforks and came back with pitchforks and fire.
Yeah.
That's the moment in which I turn away. And I'm not saying that therefore the movie's made starting that year, I'm just saying, as a person, that's where I departed shores. Now, I don't know what happened before then. Maybe before then there was even more horrors. Who knows? But all I know is that's where you leave me. Because I can have empathy for people that have done terrible things based on what they've done afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Hannah and Her Sisters, just a classic Woody Allen, movie with Mia Farrow, Michael Caine, Carrie Fisher. Crimes and Misdemeanors. This was the first one that I would have seen in the theater because I was in college, and I remember going down to the theater on the Ave. What was that called? There was the Varsity, and then there was a
Neptune Varsity.
Yeah, no, it was Varsity, and then there was Neptune. Yeah. Anyway, Match Point, again, total departure. Have you seen Match Point with Scarlett Johansson and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers?
No, I have not.
It is.
Wasn't that recent?
No, it was 15 years ago, but it's a thriller, and it's like a murder thriller, and it's not funny, and it's just a masterpiece of a movie. Vicky Cristina Barcelona with Penelope Cruz, Javier Bardem, and Scarlett Johansson. Just a beautiful movie. Midnight in Paris. Light. Owen Wilson goes back in time to the times of Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Just a real cute movie. 2013, Blue Jasmine. Alec Baldwin, Cate Blanchett, Andrew Dice Clay. Just a beautiful look into a character that Cate Blanchett plays. She was this rich lady, and then I think she went through a divorce or something, and she didn't have anything anymore, and all she had was her expensive luggage. And it's just a beautifully written story, and a classic. And he doesn't just have one or two classics. He's got 15 or 10 just like solid movies, and part of the film, you can't talk about film history without talking about Woody Allen through several decades. And I was a huge fan, and I was one of those people, that would annoy people at parties, going like, you gotta see Interiors, it's masterpiece, Woody, blah 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 blah. Like I'm one of those people, and now I don't know what to do, because the thing is, it's like I don't want to give him money if he is a monster. I don't want to validate him. I don't want to see his face if he's a monster. But I have a relationship with Interiors. Yeah. I have a relationship with Hannah and her sister. I have a relationship with Annie Hall. When Diane Keaton wears that outfit with the tie and the hat and the vest, and all of her quirkiness and insecurity, I have a relationship with her and that character.
Yeah.
And that's a part of me. And when I listen to Pretty Young Thing, even that song, I'm transported back to when I was 11 years old, and we had Thriller, and we'd put it on the record player, and me and all my family would listen front to back. And my older siblings, my younger brother, my parent, everyone loved that album. Everyone in the whole community, the videos, my cousins, we would sit around and, Beat It is on MTV. Everyone sit down and watch it. Everyone in the family just sit down and watch Michael Jackson. He's the best. And if he did it, then what do I do with that? The Bill Cosby Show, The Cosby Show. I actually have something I have to admit. I was kind of just channel surfing about a month ago, and The Cosby Show came up, and me and my wife, we watched an episode of it. Because it's it's not an amazing show, but it's delightful. It's light. It's from that time. It's actually something that was way before its time, in that there's almost no white people in the entire show. In fact, the episode that I saw, there wasn't any white people. Now, is that a definition of a good show? No, but the progressiveness of not only having every family member black, but you don't have the token white neighbor, but there was also the oldest daughter was giving birth, and so the doctors are black, the nurses are black, the spouse is black. Everyone's black. Yeah. This is middle of the 80s. This is a long time ago, and Bill Cosby was the engineer of that. He was the one who said, no, I'm going to strong arm NBC or whoever was in charge, and that they were like, we got to make this more relatable to white people. Most of your audience is white people. You got to have some white characters. And Bill Cosby said, no, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, totally. Imagine though. So imagine our mutual friend Chong. Chong shows up at your house one day, and he grabs a bat and he hits you on the arm multiple times, breaks your arm, and then you're telling me, dude. I'm like, hey, have you seen Chong? And you're like, no, I'll never see him again. I'm so upset at him. I might sue him. I'm like, what? Well, he broke my arm with a bat. Oh, wow. Anyways, I'm throwing a party this weekend. Oh, he's going to be here. You're like, wait, did you just hear what I said? Oh yeah, no, I mean, that sucks. Like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I'll be upset at him.
Yeah.
But anyways, he'll be here. He's, he's fun at parties.
Well, that's different. Okay, I get the analogy and I appreciate it, but it's different because I'm not calling Woody Allen and saying I love your work. You know what I mean?
I know.
I'm privately sitting and watching a movie on Netflix or something.
I feel like Imagine Chong is a creator, right?
But it is something that, because Dylan Farrow is a human being that deserves a lot of grace and justice. Yeah. And if I'm just, and if I'm going to be a part of this, it's sort of like global warming is happening. Do I just say, well, what am I, I'm just one person. Am I just supposed to say, well, I'm just one person? Dylan Farrow and many other people who have been victimized or people who want to stand by victims are, they're saying, okay, yeah, do I love the movies? Yeah, but it's a small price to pay to stand up for what's right and to stand by Dylan Farrow and to stand with other victims, that I'm just not going to watch his movies. And I'm also going to speak out. And now one could argue that on this podcast, we do a lot of advocacy, including this episode. Maybe not particularly this episode, but we do a lot of episodes on victim advocacy. Maybe I've paid my dues so that I can watch his movies now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, like, you take the Chong example. Chong becomes famous. He's famous. He's all over the place. And he's got a TV show. That's what it is. He's got a TV show. And, again, you come over to my house and I'm watching the Chong show. And you're like, dude, and it's actually worse. It's not just that he broke your arm. He ruined a lot of parts of your life.
Well, I would expect that Dylan Farrow's friends are not watching Woody Allen movies when she comes over, but I'm not Dylan Farrow's friend, and so...
But then you go to the media and you tell everyone, and everyone's like, okay. But then every cafe you go to, everywhere you go, people are watching the Chong show.
Yeah.
And everyone's, not only that, they're talking about it. And then you tell them the story, and they're like... Yeah, but he's just so entertaining. But listen, I hear you, because I have the same struggles with things I like. That, like Woody Allen, what's funny is you've watched so many Woody Allen movies. I was looking forward, honestly, that I had this long backlog of Woody Allen movies that I want to watch, that I keep hearing so many great things about. And now I am like...
Have you seen any of the Woody Allen movies I talked about?
A couple, but most of them no.
Yeah, and so then Stacy said the same. Stacy, I'm just completely. The guy makes so many movies. How can you not see some of?
Right.
Stacy hasn't seen Annie Hall. Have you seen Annie Hall?
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh okay.
But so I'm sitting there going, well, what do I do? I wanted to watch those movies. They're cinema history. I've been looking forward, like the Annie, Barcelona, Vicky, whatever the hell.
You love Javier Bardem. You got to see that one.
I've been looking forward to that movie so long, dude.
It's really good.
And I love Owen Wilson, and I love Alec Baldwin. Like, I love all these people.
Yeah.
But they broke my arm.
Yeah, I don't know if Blue Jasmine is at the top of the list, but Vicky Cristina Barcelona.
My arm
Midnight in Paris
broken.
is cute. Match Point, though, man, with Scarlett Johansson, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. Match Point, so good. Hannah or Sisters, Michael Caine, just so good. So good. Manhattan, beautiful. Yeah, it's not a top of my list.
And let me make another point, which is that I don't have proof, right? So it's not like I'm saying, like, yeah, we should boycott and all these things. Okay, I have no proof. All I'm saying is, like, me personally, gosh, I find it really difficult after watching that documentary to watch this man acting on a movie. Now, it's a movie he's not on screen. Maybe it's not as big of a problem for me.
Yeah. When you talked through your passionate reasoning, I was like, oh, boy, how can I now watch how can I even look at his face and not have my blood boiling now that you've sort of put it that way. Now, I think Dylan is the main person that we should be caring about. And I don't know, but I suspect she doesn't care if I watch a movie. I think she cares mostly about, do I believe her? And do I advocate for victims who come forward and advocate for people to listen to them and, tout the statistics that show that people almost never lie about this sort of thing, and talk about how victims are often raked over the coals, particularly when the perpetrator is famous and powerful. I'm pretty sure Dylan mostly cares about that. And that I will say, that I will stand by Dylan Farrow. That I will say, I do believe her. I will state that. I will state that she deserves justice. I will state that no one should be attacking her. And if you are, like, what's wrong with, how would you possibly know that she's lying? That there clearly isn't much evidence that she's lying. So at the very least, the best you could say is you don't know. The best you could say is, well, who knows? But to say that she's a liar or to attack her is criminal. And God bless you if you're one of those people and someone does something to you and you come forward and no one believes you. How crappy would that be? Now, of course, there's a whole other set of people that are falsely accused of things. But anyway, the point is that
and not forgetting too, like Sunyi and Mia and Moses, the other little boy, Moses, and all the other little kids in that family who, think of Mia, like think of how, assuming that she's telling the truth, think of how much trauma he caused her.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is I want to buy a house just like theirs. And one of the first thoughts I had is because the documentary, a lot of the interviews take place in their house, Mia, the house that they grew up in. And I thought, because sometimes they'll rent a house to do interviews in. Actually, Leaving Neverland was that way, where I could tell that they rented a fancy house and then interviewed them all in different parts of the house. And when I was seeing the beginning of this documentary, I was like, that house is too cute. It's too cool looking. That can't be the house that anyone lives in. But it is. The way it was even decorated, I want to decorate my house like that. Like it just had all these little pieces of art and, just kind of randomly distributed around the house, and those big windows and that sloping lawn down to the water and the little fences and just the hominess of it all and all the toys that are around. It just looked like a comfortable, artsy, fun, energetic, chaotic but good. I want that house.
Yeah.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.